The golden age of the American cowboy is often cited as around 1865 to 1895. Of course, it bleeds a little into the years both before and after, but it's that short period in American history that would lend its ethos to an entire country. It was an admiration of the freedom, the courage, the danger, the escape, and the self-sufficiency of the cowboy that led them to be ingrained as American ideals. Or maybe they already were, and the cowboy simply gave them a persona that could embody it all. Whichever side you fall on, the fact remains that the cowboy endured in America long past his golden hour. Not even a decade into the 1900s, the Western was an established genre of entertainment, filling countless movies, dime novels, books, paintings, song, even comic books and TV shows. The way of the cowboy also lived on in the rodeo. The contest between cowboys that arose between their seasonal work became anticipated annual events, earning their own spectators and becoming more organized. 1869 is documented as one of the first bronco busting contests, and by 1883, prizes were being issued. 5 short years later, admission was being charged, and the first professional rodeo was held in Prescott. And by the time the Great Depression plagued the land, rodeos were even being held in Madison Square Garden. The sport was now so popular, it appealed to Eastern audiences, demanded a space large enough to house its crowds, and lasted as long as 30 days. Yes, sir, rodeo was growing hell-bent for leather, and one man that found himself swept up in it would become one of its shining stars and change the sport forever. And that man was Burrell Mulkey. He was born May 25th, 1904, and spent his formative years on his family's ranch and dairy farm in Upper Snake River country near Salmon, Idaho. A cowboy from an early age, after 8th grade, he left school to begin working at neighboring ranches breaking horses for $30 a month. It wouldn't take long for the blue-eyed young cowboy to earn a reputation for his horsemanship and other essential ranch skills, and he was frequently told he could ride as well as the big boys in the rodeo circuit. Well, sure enough, Burrell began riding the much wilder broncs at the rodeo to make some extra money, around $5 for every horse he rode. And he and a friend would hitchhike to local shows and pay an entrance fee, just hoping their skills would be enough to help them earn it back with a little extra. But despite this love for rodeo and horsemanship and the incentive of a little extra cash, Burrell stuck with ranching. And by 24, he was foreman at the Wood Livestock Company. But eventually, Burrell's friend helped nudge him again into entering one of the larger rodeos. In his very first rodeo in Mountain Home, Mulkey earned 2nd place, though many sources say his first rodeo was at Ogden with a 3rd place finish in Saddle Bronc. But in either event, in Mulkey's own words, he, quote, got tired of working for $30 a month on ranches and sold his pitchfork for a buck rein. While Burrell initially competed in a range of events, he quickly focused on where his talents lied and where he could make the most money, and that was saddle bronc riding. At just 5'6" and 165 pounds, Mulkey's short, stocky stature, tenacity, and good nature earned him no shortage of nicknames throughout his career. He was called the Shetland Stud, the Banty Cowboy, that mighty little man from Idaho, and was even one of the Gold Dust twins with his close friend Nick Knight. He possessed a strength beyond his size, and source after source cites Mulkey as a man with a fire for going absolutely all out on every ride. And back then, saddle bronc riders had to stand for 12 seconds or 10 indoors. Author and rodeo historian Willard Porter wrote of him, Mulkey was known among his peers as a rider who gave his very all to each bronc. Of course, there were good horses and bad horses to scoreboard, but Mulkey looked at them all as bucking horses, and as such, he spurred all of them the same fashion: hard. With all that going for him, it wouldn't take long for the well-monikered cowboy to start bringing home the hardware and the prize money. By 1931, he won the first, second, and third places at the Nampa Harvest Festival Rodeo and won $200, and the wins kept coming. By 1935, he was a rodeo star, receiving celebrity billing at events around the country. The 1930s were Burl Mulkey's heyday. Not only a hard rider and strong, but by all accounts, he was also quite the character. Easily recognizable with his black satin shirts, Mulkey loved pranks and was quick to flash a smile. Cliff Westermeyer wrote about Mulkey, "That mighty little man from Idaho, Burl Mulkey, has a reputation of a bronc rider who never lets up in his efforts to win. Whether he rode a dog or the best of broncs, he spurred every one of them. He's short and heavy built, but as a personality, he is a character. Like ham and eggs, Mulkey and Mischief belong together. Mischief is his specialty, and he enjoys nothing more than handing out tall stories and watching the listener's eyes grow larger and larger." Now, at this time, rodeos were big business, some drawing crowds as many as 20,000 people, and as mentioned earlier, there was rodeo held in Madison Square Garden that lasted 30 days, and it was immediately followed by a rodeo in Boston that lasted 2 weeks. The Cowboys and Broncs were known by name, with both receiving newspaper coverage alongside the Bulldoggers and Ropers, and it's coverage we wouldn't find out of place today in the sports section. However, despite all this attention and money, rodeo was remarkably unorganized, with many viewing it as a show and not a sport. Thanks to its kind of overlap with the era's Wild West shows, it wasn't until 1929 that rodeo organized with official rules, points, judges, and prize money. Unfortunately, while the rodeo was organized, the Cowboys themselves didn't have an organization of their own. But that all changed on October 30th, 1936, when Mulkey and 60 other men walked out of the Boston Garden Rodeo. They were upset. They weren't receiving their fair share of the prize money, which was a few $1,000s, but they set in motion a chain of events they could not have imagined. The group of 61 called themselves the Cowboys Turtle Association because while they were slow to act, they did eventually stick their necks out. The CTA set the foundation for today's PRCA, the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. It might have only been a few $1,000s in 1936, but in 2022, PRCA members numbered well over 6,000 cowboys and totaled more than $50 million in payouts. The actions of those turtles changed the sport forever. And as if all that wasn't enough, the very next year in 1937, Burl Mulkey won the World Saddle Bronc Riding Championship. A Denver newspaper quotes him as making more than $5,000, but not very close to $10,000 in 1937. Not bad for working 10 or 12 seconds at a time, but the best prize he received that year wasn't money. It was this beautiful Colt single-action Army revolver. It's in that practically perfect combination of blued steel, case hardening, and ivory, a rustic yet refined color palette accented with the brightly polished sides of its hammer. As published by several period newspaper articles, Burl was judged the best all-around cowboy, made the governor's colonel aide-de-camp, and was presented this colt by the Louisiana governor at the Fort Worth Rodeo during the Texas Centennial. At that time, Fort Worth was one of the most important stops on the rodeo circuit, and for the finals, Mulkey had drawn the now legendary Black Bronc 5 Minutes to Midnight, an absolute tornado of a horse that threw more than 2,000 riders in his 23 seasons. Mulkey had drawn Midnight in the previous year's final as well, and that year, Midnight triumphed and threw Mulkey to the arena dirt, but this year would be different. An article by Richard Garvis tells the story best. Midnight seemed small in the chute as he climbed aboard. It almost appeared the horse was smiling and dared him to mount up for another turn in the arena. And when that chute was opened, Midnight jumped straight out like he was shot from a cannon. He immediately spun to his right to try to get Burl over his riding hand, which was his left. This was the same move as last year as he was bucked off, but Burl was prepared for the move and shifted his weight to compensate for the spin. Next was a series of crow hopping and another spin, this time to the left. Burl wasn't ready for this, and he almost left his saddle. However, he hung on, and with his left hand pulled himself back over the horse. And with his head down, Midnight tried to flip Burl over his mane, but it didn't work. And the next sound Burl heard was the buzzer, and he knew he'd completed his ride. He dismounted with his usual flair and landed on his feet with his hat in his hand. He received a rousing round of applause as he awaited his score. The crowd quieted as the judges decided his fate. And when his score of 92 was announced, the crowd exploded in cheers as they were told that Burl Mulkey was the outstanding contestant of the Fort Worth Rodeo of 1937. Burl Mulkey had won on one of the biggest stages and by riding one of the toughest horses, generally accepted as one of the greatest buckers of all time. The Fort Worth, Texas Telegraph stated the next day, quote, "For winning more than $700 in day money and the finals, Mulkey also walked off with the engraved gun, the gift of the governor of Louisiana." An inscription on the barrel's left side indicates the presentation. And for all the action, for all his work, the inscription on the backstrap of this revolver simply reads, "Outstanding Contestant, Fort Worth, 1937. The Colt 45, with its 5.5-inch barrel, was a one-gun shipment purchased by the governor and shipped to A.A. Lund of Fort Worth, Texas on March 3rd, 1937. The factory letter also listed as factory engraved, but that doesn't begin to adequately describe the remarkable work on this Colt single action. Experts attribute the work to Colt master Wilbur A. Glahn and note that the engraving done is more than Colt's finest C-grade engraving. I mean, look at the coverage. Most revolvers will have gaps between different areas of engraving, but not Burl Mulkey's gun. Glahn leaves virtually no space untouched, filling it with his classic scroll and punch dot. The work is so profuse that the caliber and model designation were forced to take up on the bottom of the barrel, a rare placement to say the least. Fitted with the exclamation point of carved steerhead grips, it has multiple magazine front covers to its name and 2 Best of Show awards. It's a winning Colt worthy of a winning cowboy. Perhaps most telling about how good this Colt is that the founding chief curator of the Autry Museum is quoted as saying, "We made a big mistake not being able to purchase it a number of years ago. Collectors today are urged not to make the same mistake." Now, Burl decided winning suited him so well in 1937, he did it again in 1938. And that year, not only did he win the Saddle Bronc Championship, his prize winnings exceeded all multi-event contestants, making him the world all-around champion cowboy. It'd be easy to double the length of this video by listing all of Mulkey's wins and accomplishments. But during a career spanning 18 years, the Shetland stud won at almost every major venue of note, often more than once. Madison Square Garden, Fort Worth, Reno, Salinas, Los Angeles, Deadwood, the Calgary Stampede, the Red Bluff Roundup, and even Little Sydney, Iowa. For 12 consecutive years, he competed at Madison Square Garden and was a top contender every year. He won top honors at Ogden 5 years in a row. Now, shortly after his first championship season, Mulkey was asked if he planned to quit riding and settle down on a ranch of his own. He answered with his trademark wide grin and said, "That's what all the top boys say they're going to do someday." Mulkey got married in June 1940, bought a ranch in Lake Isabella, California, and continued riding through 1941. He might have even settled down soon if it weren't for the events at Pearl Harbor. After Burrell's service in World War II, the couple joined the baby boom and had their only child, Myrna. Mulkey hung up his spurs not long after that. He continued ranching in Lake Isabella and was also a brand inspector for the state before he retired in the 60s. He passed on November 20th, 1982. Today, he's honored in the Bob Elias Hall of Fame, the Kern County Sports Hall of Fame, the National Rodeo Hall of Fame back in 1955, and more recently, the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame in 2011, as well as the Idaho Rodeo Hall of Fame in 2019. Those that saw Burrell Mulkey ride say he was one of the best to ever do it. A melding of man and beast in a beautifully synchronized struggle of will and strength. His rides were smooth, almost floating, atop some of the most cantankerous horseflesh of the day. A half dance, half battle of dust and leather and muscle. This is the Colt Single Action Army that Burrell Mulkey received for doing the dance better than anybody that year. It is a masterpiece of Colt factory engraving, a rare, original, high condition, important, and historic Colt that calls back the spirit of Burrell Mulkey and the golden hour of the American rodeo. And it's only a Rock Island Auction Company.